So more controversy from Andrew Cuomo in the news. Andrew Cuomo signs a bill, according to the New York Times. He has signed a bill that bans the sale of Confederate flags. Now, I'm going to read you this little excerpt from the article. Governor Cuomo signed a bill into law aimed at banning the sale of, quote, hate symbols, such as the Confederate flag or swastika on state property, even while admitting the new edict might clash with the First Amendment and be struck down as unconstitutional. This article was written by Matthew McDermott, by the way, of the New York Post. I said New York Times. It's the New York Post. Excuse me. I want to make sure I get that right. So it goes on to say, the new law, effective immediately, prohibits the sale of hate symbols on public grounds, including state and local fairs, and also severely limits the display, unless deemed relevant to serving an educational or historical purpose. But Cuomo says the rule likely needs certain technical changes, quote, so that the Empire State doesn't get caught treading upon free speech protections codified in the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment. And I'm going to read you one more quote. This country faces from Andrew Cuomo. This country faces a pervasive, growing attitude of intolerance and hate, what I've referred to as the body politic as American cancer. Cancer, he wrote in his approval message. By limiting the display and sale of the Confederate flag, Nazi swastikas and other symbols of hatred from being displayed or sold on state property, including state fairgrounds, this will help safeguard New Yorkers from the fear-installing effects of these abhorrent symbols. He continues to talk about, this is the important part, he continues to talk about it and says he fully supports the spirit of the legislation, but they need technical changes in order not to violate the Constitution. Okay, so you might say, well, this is great. No Confederate flags, no Nazi flags. Why are you covering this? This is a victory for the left. I'm going to argue no. Now listen, I do not like the Confederate flag or what it represents. It was used as a FU to the civil rights movement in the 70s, in the 50s, the current Confederate flag. Also, the Nazi swastika is pretty much universally viewed as a hate symbol and an anti-Semitic symbol. So, why would I defend these symbols? Well, I won't. I will not defend the symbols. However, I will defend people's rights to display the symbols in public. Now, here's what I mean. It's all fine and good to ban Confederate flags or Nazi flags, but what about other symbols that can be interpreted as hate symbols? For instance, if people are advocating for socialism or communism, like let's say there's a fringe group that advocates for communism and, they hold up like the Communist Workers' Party symbol. Is that a hate symbol? Because it's anti-capitalism and it's anti-American and the communists didn't like Americans. Is that a hate symbol? If someone holds up a Black Lives Matter symbol and I'm a white guy and I say, well, I don't agree with that because all lives matter and not just black lives. Is that Black Lives Matter a hate symbol? So when you talk about what's a hate symbol and what's not, you could go down a rabbit. Now, these two examples I sent to you might seem nefarious and rather silly, but when you go down this rabbit hole, almost anything that a person doesn't like can be looked at as a hate symbol. There are Christians who would say a Happy Holidays flag is hateful because it's trying to attack Christmas. There's probably some atheists somewhere who would say anything religious is a hate symbol because there were crusades, so therefore Christianity is hateful. You get what I'm saying? Like I said, these examples might seem silly, they might seem nefarious to you, but when you start legislating what type of symbols people can hold up and what's hate and what's not, well, what's hate depends on who's in office. So he's a Democrat in office. If there's a Republican governor, he might have a different interpretation. He might think other things are hate. And they might try to prosecute someone, for instance, who's communist, who's protesting for labor unions, at a government building because they're holding up, communist symbolism. Or the fist, the Black Power fist from the Black Panthers. Black Lives Matter, the whole movement has used this fist. Some people consider that to be a hate symbol, quote unquote. Are we going to put those people in jail if they bring it onto federal property or state property? Also, there's the constitutionality of this. Freedom of speech. On public property, you have the right to express your free speech in any way you please. So, pretty much anything short of threatening someone, like you can't threaten someone with bodily harm. But anything short of that comes under free speech, right? So, this is why the ACLU, has defended groups like the KKK, even though they disagree with what the KKK says, because they say, well, the KKK has the right to say things we don't agree with because we have freedom of speech in this country. Even though we don't agree with them, we have to be principled. And this is the problem. When people make the culture war front and center, they are not principled. Suddenly everything falls into what's culturally acceptable and what's culturally not. And that's fine when your group is at the top. But what about when the other group is at the top? What about when it's a more conservative group who don't like things that liberals do and think that's hate? Suddenly these silly, nefarious examples are not so nefarious anymore. I feel like I've used that word too many times. But, guys, you get what I'm saying. This is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. Because you're attacking the principle of freedom of speech. I'm fervently against Hitler. I'm fervently against anti-civil rights propaganda, anti-Semitism. But you cannot tell people what they can say on public land because it's quote-unquote hate. No. You cannot put someone in jail for hate speech. Or you cannot... And also, too, telling people what they can and can't sell, telling people they can't sell an item because it can be interpreted as hateful by someone else, that just doesn't sit right with me. Like I said, anything, I could consider anything hateful that I don't like. And if a group that I don't like is using that symbol, I can say it's hateful toward me, and bam, it could fall under the guidance of the law. And Cuomo knows this, which is why he has said, well, I agree with the principle or the spirit of this law, but we might need to work on the language so that it's more constitutional. Why would you sign something that's unconstitutional? Guys, this is exactly this is my other issue with this. This is virtue signaling. Virtue signaling 101. Hey, we're not racist, and we're going to prove we're not racist by doing a not racist thing. But you cut Medicare and Medicaid funding in your state. Minorities overwhelmingly benefit from Medicare and Medicaid. Because minorities are much less likely to be able to afford their health insurance. So do you care about minorities there? No, of course not. You just want a virtue signal. You want to be like, hey, we're not racist. I'm for good things and I'm against bad things. And here's me standing against a bad thing. That's what this is. Because they know this doesn't have a chance in hell if some group decides to take it to the Supreme Court. Not a chance in hell. It's not a chance. Not a chance that this will stay upholded. This law is unconstitutional. And he knows it. But you know what? He passed it so that he can get brownie points. And the media, CNN, MSNBC, also older Democrats, and even young liberals who are caught up in a culture war are going to say, oh my gosh, so progressive. Yes, Andrew Cuomo. Oh, Andrew Cuomo, he's such a progressive. I love Cuomo. Maybe he should run for president. I'm really starting to think there's an agenda here, guys. I'm really starting to think there's an agenda here. The culture war's got to go, man. It's got to go. We got to end this thing now before it's too late. Because we're traveling down a road that we don't want to go down. Once you go down that rabbit hole, man, there's no getting out. There's no coming back. Yeah, and all this virtual signaling, virtual signaling is something we should leave in 2020. You know what? Virtual signaling is more deadly, I would argue, than any other, is almost more deadly than any other, political trend that's been going on lately from the neo-libs. I don't want to say more deadly because I think their soft stance on climate change actually will be the most deadly thing. But this comes pretty close, man. This is bad. This is really, really bad. And somebody has to stand up and say something about it before we go down a path that there's no turning back from.